Today we're discussing a topic that probably doesn't get quite enough attention, but one that can really make a huge difference in how well we survive any kind of crisis. Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Kylene. And today we are really excited because we have Jim Phillips, who is a preparedness expert, as our guest. And today we're going to talk about the importance of building a community. And we talk about how to find people to be in your community. And when we talk about community, we're not talking about like your city or just your neighborhood, but in your group of, what would you call it?
Trusted friends, people that you want to be in a crisis with.
Yeah.
Not that we want to be in a crisis, but if we're going to be, who do we want to be there with?
We're going to talk about people who got your back and you have theirs. One of the things that we discussed with Jim is actually how to vet the possible candidates and build those relationships. So this is something that you're going to want to join us for.
Check this out. Hey, Provident Preppers, we are excited to be back with you and with Jim Phillips. Today we're talking about community and how important community is. We've talked about this a lot, but we can't overemphasize how critically important your community is. So Jim, let's jump in. We've introduced you several times. You've been doing this work since I was in junior high school. You have a vast amount of information and knowledge because you've applied that information. And now we are asking for you to share this with our audience. Let's jump in. Jim, tell us about community and why it's important.
Certainly. It's a pleasure to be here again. Now, I use the word community. You can use some different terminology for that. And when I say community, I don't mean a municipality or a governmental thing, but it's a group of people that you're working with. You could call it a tribe. You can call it family. You can call it a number of things. In fact, a lot of the people in your community may be family. And it's critically important that you be doing that because we can thrive as a community, but we're likely to die in isolation where you cut yourself off. Now, here's my process of doing this a little bit. And I became introduced to the concept of food storage and emergency things in 1971. And that's when I was a young family, I guess we just had our oldest son at that time. And this idea was presented to me about, well, maybe you need to think in terms of things happen, and there's breakdown and there was some last days things and there are all kinds of things that came into that. And it was kind of like, well, yeah, I never thought about that. Now, I'd lived independently a lot in terms of backpacking and mountain climbing and things like that and could take care of myself that way. But it's like, what do you do at home? And so food storage came into it. So we started storing food and learning things there. And you see, it's easy for us, I'll say individuals that are involved in this provident living preparedness, to think in terms of becoming self-reliant. But I want to emphasize that self-reliance is a process. It's an attitude. It's not ownership of things. It's a positive outlook. It's not negative and being afraid and fearful and things like that. It's future focused, all those things. And it's being helpful to other people, not living in isolation. And if you're not doing that as a bare minimum, you're going to end up becoming a victim. When things break down, you become a victim. Well, so I got involved in that. And then as I was studying, of course, I began my career in cold weather and winter because people are very poorly prepared to deal with winter and cold weather when there's no utilities. I mean, that's just one of those things, and I talk about that a lot. And so I started there, but as I looked at it, there's all these other things you have to take into account, the food storage and the heating and the water sanitation. You'll go down this long list. But I was doing this for me and my family. That's where we all start, me and my family, and that's where you have to start. That's a stewardship. But you have to understand this, then I'll make this statement right here. This is one that I like to teach people, that community is the key to living providently. And it's the only viable approach to the freedom of a reliable, long-term, and sustainable lifestyle. That's what it comes down to. So you've got to understand community. Now, here's my evolution to getting there. And this was about 25 years ago. I've been doing all these things. I'm teaching classes. I'm learning things, experimenting with things, becoming better prepared physically, mentally, emotionally, and everything. But as I started looking around, and I was originally in this place, well, it's up to me to become self-reliant. And that's what I'm working on because I'm the man. I have a family. That's my stewardship. But eventually I learned so much as I'm trying to put all these things together and how to do things and take care of things. I learned so much that I finally figured out I'm not going to live long enough to learn it all, is what it comes down, because there's an awful lot to it. You see, and this is one of the things that stops people from getting prepared. They sometimes look and say, oh, you have to know so much and you have to do so much and have so much expensive and time and what have you. And so they give up because they become exasperated with the whole thing. But when you realize that you don't have to do it alone, you have to do your part. You're becoming self-reliant as best as you can. I finally realized that I needed to become a part of a group. You can call it a self-mutual help group or anything like that. I just call it community. And the idea is to become a self-reliant household, interdependent within a self-reliant community. That's people that you're working together, and you want them to be as self-reliant as they can, but none of us can be just completely self-sustaining. We can be all on our own. We need people around us, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We got to have people. This is the other thing that comes into mind. You see, if you're doing everything right, you're doing everything you should be doing, you're taking care of everything you need to take care of, but if the other people around you are not doing things right, then your ability to survive can be greatly diminished. I mean, when they get sick and the community around you, the people around you are just racked with disease and sickness and everything, then you have to isolate yourself more and more, and it's harder for you to stay well, take care of yourself. So there's many things that come into play why you need to develop relationships. Now, I'll say in this country, we're always kind of independent. We want to take care of ourselves, and the people involved in preparedness are like, well, I can do it. I can take care of myself. You got to get over it. You have to get over that and realize, yes, you do that as best you can. But what you want to do is become a self-reliant household, interdependent within a self-reliant community. That's the goal that you're aiming at, because that's the only way to have a long-term sustainable lifestyle, is what it comes down to, freedom. And then the other thing that comes into play, because I realize this, when you study what's going on around the world, you look at emergencies in this country, other places, and when things get really, really bad, desperate people do desperate things. And so people that are not prepared to take care of themselves, then they're looking for somebody to rescue them. Unfortunately, we have kind of a feeling that somebody needs to take care of me in this country. We've had it so, I'll say, so soft, so good, so, tremendously easy in many ways, that it's like, well, that's the way it should be. And somebody will take care of me because they always have. And when those people do not have the support around them and they can't take care of themselves, they become desperate and they become dangerous to themselves and to other people. So when you look at all that, it's kind of easy to think about, boy, this is kind of heavy, kind of harsh. So let me give you my definition of community. Now, you can use different words for this. This is how I've defined it for years when I'm teaching a class in community. This is a unified body of individuals that are bound together through agreed upon. Now, there's key words in there. Individuals bound together and agreed upon. In other words, you're doing this on purpose. You're doing it because you want to and need to. But here's the agreed upon common attitudes, character, interests, needs, fellowship, participation, work ethic, and commitments to the positive benefit of all. It's the all for one and one for all kind of a thing, but it's orchestrated, it's planned, and you're talking about it, and you're sharing these things with each other. You're learning how to do that. You're building a relationship. The thing about building relationships is getting to know people. I've got people that I've known, wonderful people. I love them. They're great. I want to help them, but to have them living with me or on my property, or we're all in the same house, because it might come down to that. It's like, no, the personalities don't mesh real well. Some of the lifestyles or feelings or thinking about it may be based on political, or it might be religious or something like that, where people can be so strong in those things that they are just going to draw a line in the sand and say, however it is. So you know those people. Doesn't mean they're bad people. What you want them to do is be in a community where they fit in and there's not going to be a clash, because there's going to be enough trouble going on. So this brings it down to the idea that you're planning this, you're working on it, you're doing it, and I'm going to say one of the best ways to get to know people is you break bread together. Now, that's kind of a cultural thing that some societies do because they spend time, meals together and talking together. You get to kind of know people. They let down their guard. They're not wearing a facade about things. And so that's what you want to do, is get inside, understand people, and then this mutual invitation that we can work together. Of course, they've got to be thinking in terms of, hey, there's some stuff on the horizon here we need to be prepared for, let's work together. Somebody says, nothing is ever going to happen, don't worry about it. Well, you don't want them in your community because number one, they won't be prepared. And when something does happen, they figure somebody's responsible for them to take care of them because that's the way it was. Somebody was going to fix this problem. So this is why it's good to get to know people about it. So one of the statements I make is that when you're in this idea of thinking about provident living and preparedness, you never, ever, ever want to be doing it alone on your own. And this is not the, get the go bag, the get out of Dodge bag and, head off into the woods, take care of myself. Now, if you're forced into that, you can do that, but you can't do it long term. You cannot survive healthy, well, long term, totally on your own. It doesn't work. Not only for the social side of this, but you also need to have the communication. See, we're social creatures. And when we put people into total isolation, you put them in isolation confinement, solitary confinement for a while. Many people, most people, they break down. Most people, it destroys them when you go for months or years and what have you. Or when they come out, they're just not normal. You don't want to go there. We need that interplay, that communication, that sharing of personality and feelings and ideas. So it's really, really important. That's why we're doing this, all of these things, because you want to give yourself the best chance of being okay, you and your household and your family being okay. That's what it's all about. So I say never, never alone. Now, here's where we get into problems or we have a difficulty because some people say, well, I don't know anybody that thinks that way. Some people say, I don't know any like-minded people. I'm all alone in my neighborhood thinking about these things. How do I find community? And some people will tell me, well, my neighborhood, some of my neighbors, they're scary. They're scary now. Well, it ain't going to get better. So you may have to think about that in terms of what you're going to do because it might need a change of location, neighborhood. You may need to have a place that you go to. And that's one of the options that you do have is working together. People to make a decision say, well, when this happens, we're all going to go to, Uncle Bob's place, or we're going to go to this retreat that we put together that we're building and setting up this location. It may be something like that, but you've got to do that because you have to know the people around you. Let me tell you how you find some people. Because if you haven't been doing this, you're thinking about, how do I find out? And you don't want to go around saying, hey, I'm prepared and I got all this food. You want to join with me? Not a good idea. Don't do that. So what you do is you find some other organizations or places where you can go. And one of the best ones that I know of, because I've been a part of helping to found this in our area and teach within that, and that is with Citizen Corps. That is for, and this is a national program, and it's where you'll find people, because in that, this is where under the Citizen Corps umbrella comes Neighborhood Watch, CERT, the Community Emergency Response Teams and those things. You've got the Fire Corps and the other parts of that, volunteers and support of police and things like that. And then we, in our area, we're doing what we call the skills classes because we meet together. It's officially sponsored by our city, and that's how it actually works under municipalities. It may be a county or a city. And in fact, if you'll, in your city, wherever you are, if you'll just Google, Citizen Corps in my area, you'll probably find it. Unless you're in a little tiny village someplace, you may not have that, but you may not have much problem. But any of the area, you'll find it all across the country. In every state, every major city will have Neighborhood Watch and CERT. They'll be a part of Citizen Corps. There's people that are least thinking about the future. They're thinking about, how do I help people? How do I get some training and some first aid? So that's one of the ways that you can find people. Then you go there, you join with them, and you listen and you talk. And you find people that you mesh with, and you find out, well, they're close by. They may be right in your neighborhood or down the street or close by. And that's where you're going to find some people you can work with. They know people that know people that know people. So you network to find them. That's how you do it. But what you've got to do is get doing this now. If you haven't done it already, get doing this now, because you need to have this together as soon as you can, because you've got to be planning and working together. This is not showing up on the day when all the lights go out and it's like, I better find out around me some people I can work with. That's not a good time to figure that out, because you may find people that they were good neighbors, but you can't work closely with them because some of them are freaky. I mean, some of them are fidgety and agitated. They're angry about everything and they're so hard to work with, and that's not going to help you. So that's why I encourage you to do that. And so you start either joining a community or building a community. Don't wait for somebody else. Just say, well, there isn't one around here. Well, then you start it, and you go taking these actions to put it together. You start now, and then as you find people, then you actually are working with them. You meet regularly. What you'll find is some people will come and go. They'll join, they'll be with it, but they'll kind of drift off or they'll move and things like that. But it'll eventually start to gel together, but it takes time. So you need to do that now. You meet regularly. This is not about commiserating and bashing our leaders and political the things and what have you that you're all unhappy about. You're focused on you, your families, your households, your community. What can we do to prepare ourselves, work together so we will be okay when really bad things happen, that we have a plan, we're together. So you meet in a very positive way all the time. That's what you're focusing on. So that's a part of building community. That's some of the things that you do. And what you'll find out is with people, households, people will either be contributors or a producer. And this is what you want to find out. You want to find out people that are producers. They're not just all for themselves and expecting you to take care of them. They'll be a contributor or producer. Or you'll find people that are literally going to be consumers that want to sponge off of others. That's what you need to eliminate, because you just don't need that. That's why I got into teaching the things I've been doing for years, because I realized as I'm getting prepared, that's great, take care of my household. But as people around me are like not getting prepared, then they're going to look to me and they want to show up on my doorstep saying, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm cold. Well, I can't take care of everybody. It's as simple as that. One of the other statements that you want to think in terms of is, I'm not prepared until my neighbors are prepared. So you want to be helping them do that as much as you can, finding out the ones that aren't, so that you can, if you will, isolate yourself from them somewhat. So that's some of the things you do. Now, I've been on this roll right now for a minute. So what questions do you have? What thoughts do you have? I mean, I've got another hour and a half in me, so you better take control.
One thing that I really appreciate that you just discussed was sometimes we discard people out of our community because maybe they aren't physically able to do things. But we have to always remember that these people are generally older. They have a lot of wisdom. Right. They have lived life. They've seen a lot of things, and they've got things to offer. And we have to always remember that some of these people, even though you may think they are going to be consuming more than they're giving, they have a lot to give. They have a lot to offer, and they've been down the road a lot further than us. And they have some wisdom that I think we have to remember to take advantage of.
Yeah, I think that part is really important. And Jim, you were talking about the ways, I hear this a lot from our viewers. How do I find a community? How do I find like-minded people? So you talked about Citizen Corp. A lot of times we talk about your local churches, because a lot of times you'll find some good people, and just that fellowship and building those relationships and that time. You're absolutely right about the time. You have to invest that time into those relationships and be very careful that you don't disclose too much. But what are some of the other places that you have found that, I mean, there's the American Civil Defense Association and a local chapter of the Utah Civil Defense Volunteers.
Right. And there might be similar chapters of preparedness-minded people in other states and other communities. But other ideas.
Well, it's in clubs. You know, you can think of Citizen Corps as being kind of a club. It's a group or what have you. And it may be a hobby club. It may be a knitting club. It may be others where you can meet with and talk to people and find folks that have common interests, and you can drop hints about, looking at kind of world events and what's going on, and if you can find people who say, yeah, I'm concerned about those things. We're trying to get ready to deal with those things. So what you'll do is, in this group setting, you'll find some people that'll have some common beliefs or interests with you. And then you get to where you exchange some phone numbers and you get to know those people, or emails and what have you, so you can reach out to them cautiously and carefully, find out where they are. And both of you are trying to approach each other, because neither one of you wants to give away the farm right now, but you're going to be exploring how far along are you. One of the best ways to do that, in fact, I talk about in building community, the challenge and the necessity of vetting members who are going to be a part of your community. You need to find out who they are, what they stand for. And so if you're in a group, let's say that you're in a book club, and there's maybe reading clubs or things like that, or a library club, and you start talking about some of the books that you should be reading, and you mention that to them. This is one of the ways that I vet people. I find out where they are because I mention some books, and they go, somebody says, that's a scary book, I could never read that. Well, okay, well, they're out of my list. They're not going to be part of that. But if somebody said, yeah, I read that book, there were some really interesting things there that got me thinking. That's what you're looking for, is thinking people. And by the way, what you said about, now, when you came on, you said that you've been listening to me since you were in junior high. I'm going like, yeah, I'm one of them old people, right? Well, and it's true. And when we say contributors, that doesn't mean people that are going to be contributing material things only. I mean, yes, there should be, but it is the skills, the knowledge, the understanding, the attitude. And some people can be very calming influences. That's what you're looking for. You don't want somebody that as soon as something happens, they douse their head with gasoline and toss a match in it, run around saying my hair's on fire. There are people who are like that. Something happens immediately, they're reacting. You're looking for people who have learned how to respond to things and they're not freaky upset about stuff. So when we're talking about people to be in your community, isn't just somebody that says, I got a 5-year food supply, you can be a part of my community. No, it's the personality. It's the skills, it's the knowledge, it's the people who know how to raise chickens, how to can, and those kinds of things. They may not have a lot physically at this time, but as you draw them in and you're learning from them and you're sharing with them, they may start to be doing more, saying, I never thought about, I can some things every year. I need to be canning more. Maybe we could get together and can together. So there's all kinds of ways you can approach finding people through other groups and associations and by dropping hints about things, and in particular, talking about books. That's one of the things that I do. If somebody says, well, can I work with you? And sometimes people come to me, they want some consulting and they want me to do things. I want to find out where they are. And so I give them a reading list. And if somebody says, no, I've already read that book. Good. And, yeah, I've read that one. Okay, we're really on the same page. Or if they say, okay, give me the reading list, and I do that. And if somebody says, well, I don't read books, or I don't read books like that, well, I can't necessarily help them. They're a little too far out in those things. So some of the books that are extremely important, some of them are, I'll say they're novels. They're written as a theoretical thing. And there are 2 of those that are the top of my list. And I tell people, you need to read this book. And I want to see what their response to it is, how they react to that book. And if somebody says, oh, that scares me, I don't want to go there, I couldn't even read that book. Okay, fine. I know where they are. One of those is a book, most people have heard about this for years, 1 Second After by William Fortune. It's about EMP. Excellent, excellent, excellent book. And it has a lot to teach. What I appreciate about him, he is he writes about basically himself, where he lives in Black Mountain, where I've been there, and about Montreat College and those things. I've been to that area, not on talking about preparedness, but I was back there working on a consulting project, and he's writing about his community there, and he is, in fact, a historian. He's very knowledgeable individual. Excellent book, well thought out, and it gives you some ideas in there. He addresses some problems that I have never seen other authors take on. And that's why read that book, reread it. It's also available as an audiobook. I go through that book at least once or twice a year as an audiobook now. I own the book. I listen to it again because I pick up something and it keeps me thinking. So that's one of those theoretical books, very important. The other one is Patriots by James Wesley Rawls. That's another one that will teach you things, and he addresses some things in there very, very well. There's a few political things in there some people may be uncomfortable with. Well, fine, get over it. But it's an excellent, excellent book that he has done. So those are 2 books right now. If you want to find out where people are, have them read those books or find out if they've read them, and then you'll know. Because if they reject that book, okay, I know who you are, where you are, it's okay.
So, Jim, I have to say something. So you wouldn't want me in your group, because I have tried to start both of those books, and quite frankly, the language and the intensity of the subject matter was not something that I'm willing to read at all. And so I get the Cliff Notes from Jonathan because he's okay reading them. But for me, there is a lot that I read, but that I couldn't read it. So you wouldn't want me in your group.
No,
and I have a lot to give.
No, there's a lot of things and there are some other people. I've had a few people say, well, they use some language in there. It's not. Yeah. I've gone through a few books that are like, oh, gee, this is hard for an old guy who was a sailor to read. And some of those books I put them down because that's just more than I need to put into my brain or into my thinking.
Yeah.
And so I understand that. That doesn't necessarily, knock somebody out, but it's kind of like, okay, but let's go to some other books that don't have that are really, really important. One of these books is, there's actually 3 of them that I always say you need to have these books in your library reading them. One is Deep Survival, and that has some language in it too, but Deep Survival by Lawrence Gonzalez. That is my classroom for building your attitude. It's extremely important book to go through that. And it's also available as an audiobook. The other one that in fact, I don't think it has any language in it at all that you'd object to. That's Miracle in the Andes by Nando Parado. That's about the movie Alive was made about that, and the book Alive. Those are not as valuable. The Miracle in the Andes is a very valuable book because it really follows on what Lawrence Gonzalez is teaching in Deep Survival about developing your attitude and learning how to respond to things, not to react, understanding how the brain is wired. That's what it is. And the subtitle on Deep Survival is Who Lives, Who Dies, and Why. That's why I bought the book. Deep Survival was of interest. The picture on the front of the book kind of turned me off because it's another gee whiz, mom, look how I survived this terrible thing. But it was a subtitle, Who Lives, Who Dies, and Why. I said, I need to understand that. And so that's why I promote that book very, very heavily. Miracle in the Andes, when you read that after you've done Deep Survival, is you're going to start seeing who's going to live, who's going to die, and why. You'll see it in there. The other book to get, it's by Robert Trumbull, is The Raft. It's a classic. 1942 is when it was written in there. And the reason for these books is because each one of them, when I do a class on them or that series of books, is they're going to teach you some things and give you examples. And all three of those books are full of real life examples. That's what they're full of. And The Raft is about, you think in terms of you have to have a lot of supplies and things to survive. Well, they didn't have much to start with. They had a raft and a whistle and a couple little things, but they didn't have any supplies, anything whatsoever. And after, I think it was 34 days when they washed upon the island where they washed upon, this was the total inventory. There were 3 men naked. They had a whistle on a chain and a raft that was falling apart. That was their total inventory. They were in terrible shape. They just barely made it. But what you learn from that is they were doing what they could do for as long as they could do it. And they were blessed, I believe, by heaven that said, okay, you've done enough. We'll get you to this island. But they were trying to get there. They knew where they wanted to go. So those books are very important.
I think you're right. Those are. Have you read the series by Chris Stewart?
What's the name?
Remind me the name. Wrath and Righteousness.
Wrath and Righteousness.
I love that. He's really good about not using the language, but is it a 4-book series or 5?
5 or 6 or 7.
It's a lot, but it's actually an amazing book and books. And one of the things that I really like about it is that, he does a really good job of portraying really how the evil that's out there, the threats, and how people are able to take care of it. And he does it in a way that I think, well, some of it is a little bit terrifying, right? There's a nuclear event. There's an EMP, and there's a lot of stuff. But you know who Chris Stewart is? He's a congressman, and he's an Air Force pilot, or he was an Air Force pilot.
Yes.
Amazing man. But I would highly recommend his series because I have loved them, quite frankly.
What's the series of the books again?
It's Wrath and Righteousness. And all of these books tend to open our eyes. And you alluded to this. Of course, I knew about EMP a long time ago, but in the 1 second after, he talked about the nursing home and some other things that I hadn't even considered. There are serious issues, hospitals, nursing homes, and all kinds of situations like that I've kind of on the periphery, I guess, thought about those kinds of things, but it made it real. It made it so that you understand more about, okay, the threats are real and there's things that we haven't even thought about yet. So understanding, putting those in your brain so that you can start thinking about them. And there's no immediate solutions, but there are, thought processes that are going on in the background as to, okay, how would we deal with that if that happened in our community? And things like addiction, people who are addicted to maybe alcohol or drugs, and suddenly their supply is gone. There's difficult issues.
Let's go a little bit back to that relationship, right? Community and relationship. So this group isn't something that you can set up and say, hey, if something bad happens, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and leave it alone. You have to continually build those relationships. You talked about breaking bread with people and how important that is. And that's one of the things that we do a lot is go out to dinner or have people over for dinner or game night or something, because that relationship is so important that we maintain those relationships. And we don't always do it about prepping, right? We don't always surround the topic. Sometimes it's just, how are you doing? And this is going on in life. And we take care of each other's day-to-day needs too. And our personal group, we're very inclusive. There are people that you're going to keep you close so that you can watch them better, right? So you can keep an eye on them.
You can be a resource to them, you can help them, but also at the same time trying to keep them more at arm's length, because just to let them in too far, they could become a real drain. People that are extremely negative and whining and what have you, it's like keep them at arm's length. You can help them and assist them, but you don't want to get them too close to you because they'll poison you, or they'll poison your group. They'll tear you down. The book Alfred Lansing wrote, Endurance, which is about Shackleton, Ernest Shackleton, and that stranding down in the Antarctic. Extreme. When you understand leadership, that book is about leadership and governance. Yes, it's about all the hardships and everything they had there. Shackleton was an incredible leader, and what he had to do was he had to separate away some of the people that were negative, that were the whiners and what have you. He held them close to him so he could watch over them, if you will, and take care of them. He didn't want to put them in with some of the other groups because it'd poison them. And they had to figure out how to work together through this, to get out of this terrible situation. That's one of those impossible situations. You look at it, it's impossible that all 51 of those men could come back. And Shackleton made the promise he would bring them all back, and he did. And since I'm highly experienced and done a lot of things in the Arctic and cold weather now, I look at that and I go like, oh my goodness, that was just incredible what they did. But it was the leadership and the governance of Shackleton that did that. So you learn about leadership in some of these books. That's really, really important. There is a book, it's the Survival Group Handbook by Charlie Hogwood. There aren't too many manuals in this. Now, there's good leadership books. I was trying to think of one of them right now. Leadership and Self-Deception is an excellent book on this, where you learn about yourself and leadership. So you look at those things. But in relationship to, I'll say, surviving and preparedness and those things, there aren't very many books that are written in that form. Someday I may get around to writing the book. Right now I just teach the class, and those things have handouts and stuff like that. And it'd be nice to put it into a written form someday, but I haven't had time to do that one yet. But the Survival Group Handbook, it's a good starter. It's a good place to go, particularly if you couple it with some of the other books and you take ideas from them that'll help you. So those are some of the things those are some of the things that you do to both vet yourself and vet other people, and get yourself thinking about this, because this is going to be a reality. Some of the things that we face, what we have to do, you're either going to be making these preparations for yourself and other people, putting together a community, and you'll do that now and get started and keep it up daily. Daily, you're going to do something. If nothing else, you'll listen to a part of an audio book or read a chapter or in the scriptures, any of those things that's going to build yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to do those things daily. Because when the flash goes off, when the lights go out, when whatever it is that happens to you individually, personally, to our whole community or the globe, you're going to be exactly where you are, and you're going to have to pick it up from there. It isn't now it's time to get ready because we're in the midst of this. You've got to be doing it now. And if you don't do that, you're going to be a victim. And when things get really, really bad, victims don't survive unless somebody is there to take care of them, and there won't be enough people to take care of everybody. So you have to do that yourself. And if you're doing these things, my idea is to be able to face the future with hope and confidence. That's what it comes down to. I want to face the future with hope and confidence, not gloom and doom and worry and what have you. And I look at things and go like, oh my heck, this is awful. But, well, if it's a possibility, start dealing with it, getting ready for it. Do everything you can to be prepared. That's what you do. And none of us, no matter what we've done, for how many years we've done it, none of us will be completely, totally prepared to deal with it when it really comes. But we're going to be further down the road, and with our experience, we can extrapolate. And then if you have a community, because there will be people around you that know things you don't know, have skills you don't have, or have a tool you don't have, that's why you put it together, so you can share knowledge, spirit, the confidence, tools, food, all kinds of things. That's what you're doing. You're trying to draw those things together. That's why it's so critically important to do that and get started now.
So, Jim, I have to say something about this. We're always preparing for the big event, but quite frankly, our community that we have enriches my life every day. It is so incredible how much more strength we have. And in everything that we do, we can bless others, and they help us. And life is just better because we're working together. And I really see that when something big or it happens, I can see us very easily transitioning from where we are to where we need to be at a different level because of the foundation that we have been able to build. So now you have an advanced class on this. Tell us about that.
Well, I have a class. It's called We're All in This Together. The idea being when it happens, we're going to be in it together. And the idea is you want to be building a community to put things together. So that's the community class that I have that goes into the same things I've said here, but a little bit deeper. That's available on my website, jimsway.com. I have that in my subscription library. I have a lot of things that are published there for free. And then I have one where there's a little charge to it because I'm trying to figure out how to pay for some of these things I do and some of the expenses. And that members library, it's $5.99 a month, and that gives you access to We're All in This Together and a bunch of other classes on sanitation, the cold weather class. That's a 20-hour class, and water and those kinds of things with some depth to them. And I keep adding things to it. So that's where that community class is there that goes into it in deep with handouts, and a lot of things to help you think more deeply about doing this, because you really need to do it. Get the books. I talk about these books all the time. Get those books, be thinking about them, working with them, and finding out who else is reading the same books, because if they're reading the books, then you're kind of on the same page. You may want to be drawing closer together. And of course, you do this within your family, children, grandchildren, aunts, uncles, whoever you're doing that, to find out where some of those people are and helping them get better prepared mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, all of those things. It's very important that you do that.
Thank you, Jim. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I think one that our audience and everyone really needs to understand and be working on, because this is truly as important as anything else out there. Your food, your water, all these things we think about, but our community is probably the most important asset that we have. So thank you for addressing that with us today. And for the question of the day today, what are you doing to build your community? Throw out your ideas. Tell us how you're making that happen. Comment below. And thank you for being part of the solution.